And I got laser focused on like, what's the biggest impact I want to make and how does that impact look and who are the people that I know I can help the most in this capacity. Like it was just so clarifying.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. Are you a therapist thinking about making the switch to coaching? Do you want to be known for something you care deeply about and then get to help people all over the world with it? How do you even start? What does that look like and what does that feel like? And what will people think? This week, I'm talking to someone who did all of that and built a profitable and joyful business over the past 5 years. My guest is Megan Hale, First Business Strategist, former psychotherapist, and money mentor for equity-driven entrepreneurs. Let's get into it. Hey, Megan. Welcome to Rebel Therapist.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
I want to find out all about your switch to coaching. Can you tell us right now who you serve and how you get paid working with them?
For sure. So these days, I work with equity-driven entrepreneurs who are really here to step into more revenue in a feel-good way, while also cultivating a relationship with money that feels soul-level good, very supportive, nourishing, encouraging, and expansive for who they're here to become. A lot of my clients are coaches, consultants, creatives, those who are really using their gifts in a meaningful and unique way to make the impact that they're here to make in the world.
And can you tell me about the different ways that you work with people right now, the different programs that you have?
For sure. So I would say I have what most people might see as a signature program, which is called the Money Map, which is basically a profit planning tool that I've developed. It's a system of spreadsheets and calculators that walks people through a set of core processes for how to structure your business to be more sustainable and to earn more money, but also how we manage that money once it comes in. So it's intentionally funding our dreams. So the Money Map it's a self-paced course, but it also comes with 3 months of live support inside my membership community called Feel Good Money, where I show up twice a month and I coach people live, and we're building a very money positive space of being in community with each other, talking about money, normalizing it, celebrating it. I have found that it's so important to have that space where you can share money wins and feel safe in doing so. So that's the primary way that I work with people. I also work with people one-on-one, and I have a one-on-one intensive that's very focused on restructuring your business to be in deeper alignment. And we also talk about Profit First, which is a methodology that I'm certified in. And I also have a new program that I'm going to be launching soon as well called Feel Good Money Daily, which is helping people cultivate a daily money practice that shifts the way money feels for good.
So in your community, you were saying when they do the self-paced course, they're also then in the community for a while. When you're coaching people there, when you're on those calls with folks, how many people are usually on there at a time?
Maybe around 40 or so. The membership community really launched last August of 2020. And we had about 100 people come in that cohort. And then we've had several more people come in since then. So the community is still in its infancy stage, I would say. But the dialogue is just so rich and so good. So I would say on average, we have about 40 people on a call. And that's a really good energy.
That's nice. And with 40 people, are you mostly doing kind of spotlight coaching where you're speaking with one person at a time, or how do you run those calls?
So I usually will open it up with just a personal share of what's been going on in my business. I really think it's important to me to normalize all the things entrepreneurship asks of us and to really create, I would say like a in parallel leadership model instead of like the top down, I know all the guru things. I'm here to teach you everything that I know. I really think it's important to create a space where we're all in the same playing field. We're all in this together. So I'll typically share something that's really relevant for me, how this has related to different stages of business growth, because we have entrepreneurs that are all in different phases of growing their business. And then we'll open it up for questions and what's present and what's coming up for them. And that's when we'll typically get into more one-on-one conversation with people who are there to be coached. And the conversation just kind of evolves from there.
I know I'm getting really nerdy with these very like tactical questions, but I'm so curious and I think this stuff is very helpful. What platform do you use for the group calls?
Right now we use Zoom. I think Zoom is basically running the world right now, which was so funny the pandemic is very serious, but when Zoom started becoming such a well-known platform, it's like, oh my gosh, like people are entering the world that I've been in for, 5-6 years now. So we run everything through Zoom, and then all of those calls are recorded and live inside the membership site. So people can go and explore that wisdom, explore the conversation for whatever we talked about that day.
So one thing I love about Spotlight coaching in groups is that somebody comes in with a question that another member or a bunch of other members didn't realize that they also wanted to ask. Do you find that happens?
Oh, for sure. Yes. And I think that's such the benefit of being in a larger community space, is that you realize that you're not alone in whatever you might be struggling with or questioning. And that in and of itself can just be so reassuring that this is a normal experience,
Absolutely. Yeah. So as much as we have helpful things to say in that coaching, it's also just so healing to be in a space where you're not alone, where somebody else is asking the question, where people are getting vulnerable, especially around money.
Oh, yeah. Yes, for sure. And I think that's the thing that I've heard just the most feedback on, of just even talking about money regularly, how healing that is in and of itself, because not a lot of us have spaces where those conversations are being held.
That actually brings me to something I'm really curious about, which is what it's been like for you to switch from therapy to coaching, because what we're talking about right now is really an example of something that we wouldn't do as therapists, running a community, having these group calls of that size. So can you tell us a little bit about what led you to realize that you wanted to start stepping into coaching?
Yes. So first of all, I didn't even know coaching was a thing for the longest time. And I was one of those kids who knew what they wanted to do from a very early age. I remember sitting in my first Psych 101 class in high school of like, this is it. This is what I'm here to do, to help people understand themselves, to also understand me, and to help people live more healthy, happier lives. And I also went to therapy for the first time back then too, for depression and anxiety. And I remember sitting in my therapist's office of like, oh my gosh, like you get to help people all day. And so I knew that was my track from that moment on. And so the goal was to always open a private practice. So I went through all of my supervision, and luckily my supervisor was in private practice, and she let me build up a small caseload as part of my supervision there with her, while I also learned the ins and outs of what it meant to run a practice. And so when I was fully licensed, I was like, this is it. I'm going to go and make good on the big dream. And so I did, and I opened up a private practice, and it was amazing and it was wonderful. And I also knew when I opened it that I was going to have to close it down 18 months later, because I am an active duty military spouse.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So you knew you were going to have to move, and you can't be licensed everywhere.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
But the thing that I didn't realize is that starting my own private practice not only allowed me to step into a dream, but it also awakened me to a part of myself that I didn't even know existed, which was being an entrepreneur and having full agency over my time, my schedule, the kinds of clients that I saw, the kinds of rates that I wanted to charge, because I was always private pay from the get-go. And the thought of giving that up was just something like, that's just not me. And so that's when I kind of started to get curious of like, I know I'm not going to open a private practice every 3 years because that would be a lot. So how could my gifts, how could my education, my background help people in a different way? And it just so happened that a lot of my clients that were coming into my therapy practice, they were coming in with anxiety, depression, relationship issues, which were some of my favorite areas to really help people with. And when we got down into the work, I found a lot of core themes, that there was a lot of work to be done around authenticity and vulnerability and living true to your values and building up assertiveness in our relationships and really asking for what we want and all of these things. And that's the other thing. I was like, I wonder if other people are struggling with this, but they're just not coming into a therapy office, right? And as it turns out, so many of us, I mean, I think Brene Brown's work is so evident of that, of how many people resonate with this idea of vulnerability and authenticity. And that's when I really started to kind of get curious around how this could actually look. And that's when I found coaching and I was like, I think that this might be the thing. And so I made the leap in 2015 when we moved and retired my license and went full steam ahead into this new modality.
Do you remember a moment of a decision point of letting your license go? Like, do you remember a moment of like, I'm not renewing or whatever that was? Yeah.
Yes. Moving into the coaching world, a lot of my colleagues who were therapists at the time did not understand. They're like, why would you do that? This seems like a step back. You don't even have to be licensed or have a certification to do this type of work. You just work so hard to get your license and all of those things. And I sat with that for a very long time. And I think back then, I mean, things have changed so much since 2015, but back then it just felt like there was so much gray area around what's okay, what's not, crossing state lines. Like telehealth was just getting like kind of up and running, you know? And I think for me, the decision point came when I didn't want to ever put my license in jeopardy and things were just not as clear as I needed them to be. And so I decided I still have my license in Texas. It's just inactive. I can always reactivate it if I want to and just take my jurisprudence exam again. But it just felt easier and clearer for me to take that next step forward. And that's just the decision that made the most sense for me. I know many clients of mine still maintain their therapy license. And I think it's really just around finding the thing that feels good and supportive for you.
Yes, absolutely. What gave you the confidence that this was going to be the right choice for you? Including, were there people in your life who really got it right away and could see, yeah, this makes sense for Megan?
Not many.
Yeah.
I go
Me neither.
back.
Me neither, by the way. Like that's not common.
I remember I was in therapy at the time when I was like really starting to navigate this transition. And there was so much self-doubt, so many voices of not enough, of what I thought that I needed to do in order to establish this confidence for myself. And a lot of that led to some inner child work of really understanding what enoughness meant, the stories that I was holding, who I thought I needed to become, and all of these things. But the thing that I did not anticipate, getting to know my inner child, is that there's another facet of me too that I call the rebel, who was my adolescent self, who kind of was like resisting, all the norms that were placed on her and just forging her own path. And back then, she was kind of a rebel without a cause. But as I've kind of integrated those parts of myself, I started to realize that that was the part of me that knew who she was here to be. She wasn't going to let anybody else tell her anything otherwise. And she actually was that part of me that really helped me take those confident leaps of just following that inner voice, honestly, and just trusting if you leap, eventually you're going to land where you need to be. And so that part of me has served me so many times.
Yeah. What was your first coaching offer? Was it one-on-one coaching?
It was actually a group program.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. So when I was starting to make the transition, I started off leading these workshops in my community that I would stream live. And I literally don't even remember what platform I used back then of how I was doing this tech-wise. But I was leading this series on becoming whole. and really helping people integrate these pieces of themselves, how to show up in like their spiritual truth. Because a lot of my psychotherapy was spiritually oriented work as well. So that's how it all kind of started. So I was starting to kind of get more experience holding a container of multiple people at once, but doing more psychoeducational type stuff. And so when I started to launch my coaching practice, I had a program that I launched called Launch Your Life. And it was really helping women come into their purpose and really identify what that work looked like for them, the values that they held, the vision that they had in their lives, and building the confidence to actually pursue it. So that was my first coaching offer back in January of 2015.
How did the money piece become your central niche? Like, how did that become your signature offer?
Yes. So that's something that I never expected, ever. So it's been such a joy to let money kind of arrive and show me the way forward there. So money was not something that felt good for me for a very long time. And as I started to grow my coaching practice, a coaching business has such a different pricing modality than a therapy practice does. And entering into that world, there were a lot of money triggers that started to show up for me, a lot of self-doubt around pricing and all of these things. I really struggled to create financial momentum for myself. And that was it was heavy for a very long time. So the first 3 years of my coaching practice, I mean, just struggling to get by financially. And then in late 2017, I was getting ready to go on maternity leave with my second little boy. And my husband was going to be deploying for 6 months, like 3 weeks after we had him. So I was going to be home with a 1.5-year-old and an infant.
Oh,
it was the most traumatic
really
year of my life.
Wow.
That's a whole nother story. But that was also the year that I ended up doubling my revenue, working half the time. Money came in and was the most supportive aspect of my business. And so much healing work happened in that year between me and money. And that was really the foundation.
Why do you think your income doubled?
Because at the end of 2017, I asked myself some radically different questions. So for 3 years, I've been like trying to work towards this 6-figure success that had been told to me was like, this is what success is, make 6 figures and all this. And so I was just obsessed with it. Like, how do I get there? How do I get a seat at that table? Right. And instead of asking myself that, I said, what would make me feel really personally successful this year? That I also felt supported to go and enjoy maternity leave. Like, I took the pressure off. And instead of pursuing somebody else's version of success, I got radically clear on my own. And once I knew what that was for me, I put real numbers behind it. So I started calculating how much my dreams, like my personal vision of success looked like for that next year. And you know what? It wasn't 6 figures. It was like 96K. It was close. But seeing that number pop up was so life-shifting for me of like, wow, I have been pursuing a number that held no personal meaning for me whatsoever. And something around having that meaning associated with my money just shifted. And the other question I asked myself is, what's the most easeful way that I can actually get there? Because I don't have hardly any time to work on my business next year, realistically, because I knew so much was going to be on my shoulders. And that's when I completely restructured my business. I created one offer that allowed me to work 10 hours a week. And it took me to that dream revenue number. And that was like, what have I been doing for the past 3 years?
That's gorgeous. That really makes a lot of sense to me. So you got so focused on why, like exactly why, what, not just because that's success, but why exactly do I want every one of those dollars? What is it paying for? What is it making possible? What is it allowing me to do and share and be? And then also, okay, so now that I'm like, that's what I'm doing and why, now, like, what's the you said easeful, like what's the easeful? And then another word that comes to mind is like efficient. What's like the efficient way to get there. I've done this exercise before, and I'm not sure, but I think it actually came from Mike Michalowicz of Profit First, from one of his books. This exercise of like taking out things that you do in your business until you get down to just a real bare minimum of what is most important. But yeah, I've done this experiment of like, what if it were pulled back to like the amount that I work now is like tops on a super wild week, it would be 25 hours, but it's usually less than that. But in thought experiments, like, well, what if it were 15 hours? What if it were 10 hours? What if it were 2 hours? You know, what would you be doing? What is the most efficient and also the most important work that you're doing?
Yes, it was exactly that. And I think that that's, you know, back then it felt like such a hindrance that I wasn't going to have hardly any time. And it ended up being the best gift because I learned how to do more by doing less. And I got laser focused on like, what's the biggest impact I want to make and how does that impact look and who are the people that I know I can help the most in this capacity. Like it was just so clarifying, so clarifying. And now that's really the foundation of everything that I help other people do.
Yeah. And if you only have 10 hours, like you're not going to fuck around. Like if you only have 10 hours.
Like you're saying no a lot.
Yeah.
Which is also very, you know, I think it was really helpful for boundaries, like helped me grow as a CEO. Like so many beautiful gifts came from that year while I was also being challenged in so many other ways in my personal life, you know?
Mm. Did you ever find, because I'm just picturing you there, like taking care of your little ones when you're not working, what did it feel like to step away from work? Like if you were working those few hours that day and then you had to step away?
My business was truly like an emotional anchor for me because it was the thing that I felt like I thrived at when everything else felt so heavy and out of my control. Like when your 1.5-year-old isn't sleeping and then you finally get him down and then the infant needs to wake up and nurse and you're so tired. Like all of those things were just so overwhelming that when I could sit down at my computer of saying, this is the space that I get to kind of have a greater sense of control and how that feels, that actually felt safer for me than going into the overwhelm of that very challenging season of motherhood, you know? And I think that if I wouldn't have had my business, that would have really, because my identity shifted so much that year as it was, I feel like that I would not have been as okay. Not that I was okay. It's definitely like struggle with my mental health. But had I not had that, I think I would have struggled even greater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally get that.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to our conversation with Megan in just a second. Are you a therapist who's stepped into coaching like Megan? Have you struggled with the decision of what to do about your therapy license? I would love to hear about it. Email me at info@coachingwithannie.com. Even better, record a voice memo telling me about your experience and email it to me at info@coachingwithannie.com. I would love to share your actual voice. Now, in a second, we're going to get right back to that conversation, and Megan's going to tell us about what happened when she decided to meet with her money every day for a year. First, I want to invite you to apply to create your program. If you're excited about expanding your business beyond private practice and you have no idea where to start, this is the place to start. Most people who go through this 5-week process say at the beginning, I have no idea where to start. I have so many ideas, but I'm overwhelmed. And then after 5 weeks, they have a clear niche, they have a pilot program, and they have already started sharing that program with their communities. This 5-week experience gives you so much support to make that possible. So go over to rebeltherapist.me/create and learn much more about it and apply. Okay, let's get back to Megan. Another thing that I'm fascinated about is you had told me that you went through an experiment or a practice of meeting with your money every day for a year?
Yeah.
When was that?
That was 2018. It was the consistent habit of like, I'm meeting with my money, but it was also me meeting with myself. And that's the thing that I think was the biggest awareness and aha with that, is if we meet with something consistently, we're going to be meeting with what's present for us to explore. And there's a lot to explore when it comes to money for most of us. And I think that's why that year was just so powerful when it comes to money growth and very money specific work. Because there would be some days that I would show up and I would feel really anxious. And I'd be like, oh, what's here for me? Like, where is this anxiety coming from? Sometimes it'd be about money and sometimes it wouldn't be about money. And I don't think if I would have had that consistent practice that I would have been able to start to differentiate the two, because we can project so much onto money. And then other days I would show up and I would want to avoid it. I didn't want to look at money. I didn't want to think about money, talk about money, dream about money, any of that. Like, what's going on here, right? And so I would notice just the way my emotions would rise and fall, as they typically do normally in life, but how that was actually impacting how I felt about money. And so that was when just so many ahas happened of being able to look at the unique relationship that I was cultivating with money, how I wanted money to feel for me personally, how I wanted it to flow and show up in my business, and how to intentionally create it. And money started to become this safe place for me. And it had never, ever felt safe before. But I honestly think that safety came from creating more intimacy with it by meeting with it more frequently.
Did you have particular guidelines of what it meant to meet with your money, like certain things that you needed to do in that practice?
Well, at that point, so back in 2017, I was asking myself those different questions and I was calculating how much my dreams actually cost. That was really the foundation of the money map, which is what, I teach other people now. And so when I would sit down and look at my money, I was meeting with my money map every day. My personal goals, I was looking at my projections. Because I had created that one offer, I had consistent revenue coming in every single month. And so I literally had to do nothing else the whole year if I didn't want to and still feel supported. And I think the earning component of that, first of all, earning is very healing, which has been very, very powerful for me to acknowledge and to even help other people see. Because I think sometimes we can get into that dynamic. It's like where we have to earning. Like once we've done enough of the inner work, then we can go and earn the money. But it's like we can actually do these things in parallel. We can earn and heal at the same time. And it's very important that we do it that way. So with the money that was coming in, I was noticing so what do I want to do with this money? So a lot of money management pieces started to come into play, like the practical ways I'm interacting with money, but also the emotional, the spiritual, the energetic, the emotional pieces of what was present for me with money too. So I would sit down with my spreadsheets every day. And some days I would open up my actual bank accounts and look at what's going on there. But more or less, it was really staying present with what was present, staying curious, and letting what needed to be expressed felt.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So this is making me think about how just in the last few weeks, I've been, with the help of my financial advisor, I've been moving my investments over to different kinds of investments, that are more environmentally friendly, that are more equity-based, making more, sustainable decisions. So I've been moving my money. And that part's good. That feels great. And I've been finding that certain parts of I use Vanguard, certain parts of going into Vanguard and making the actual switch. There's a part of me that gets kind of sweaty, that gets kind of overwhelmed, afraid I'm going to make a mistake, afraid that I'm not going to dot an I that's going to end up really mattering. And so I observe myself getting into this sweaty state when I take certain actions with my money, like this one, this big move. Whereas other ones I've gotten pretty comfortable with. Like I use Profit First. I use that system. And like every time that I do the distributions, I really enjoy it. And I'm like, I know I'm going to put this much into my profit account this month. And those things feel like comforting rituals. So I'm just thinking this is really a lifelong unfolding, isn't it? Of like, we get comfortable with one part of it, but then there's still another part to kind of get comfy with.
I think that's why I love money so much, is because it's so layered, it's so nuanced. There's never going to be an end to which the layers we can explore it through, you know? It's so intersectional too, just thinking about how the unique identities we hold intersect with our money beliefs and what we think is possible for ourselves, how systems of oppression intersect with that, how historical, events intersect with our family's beliefs about money that were then handed down to us. Like, it's so rich. It's so fascinating. But on the other side of that is also all of the practical pieces of money around like investing and taxes and like all of those pieces, right? And that's a skill set. That's knowledge based. So there's so much to learn. And even I am still so much learning about like investing and taxes, because those questions come up so much, especially around, helping people with Profit First. So I think that's the other thing too, is like, I love learning, and money just feels like this limitless well in which there's always going to be more to learn and explore.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Sometimes when I'm learning something new about money, I get that sweaty thing I was just telling you about, and I get overwhelmed and I'll think, oh, I'm never going to understand all this. And then I'm like, wait a second. That is not necessarily true, because look at how much I understand now that I did not understand, 5 years ago. So, I just try to slow myself down and remind myself, no, I can get there if I want to.
Yeah, and you don't have to learn all the things there are to learn about money either,
True.
Like, we can lean on other people and that's their expertise. So it doesn't have to be a silo activity. It can be a collaborative effort. So that's the other thing. Because I've thought, gosh, maybe I should learn more about taxes. Maybe I should go back for financial advising or any of those things. It's like, but you enjoy this aspect of money, like helping people connect the dots, the strategy of it, the personal meaning of it. Let other people add their 2 cents and collaborate with you,
Yes, that makes so much sense. Like, you don't have to learn every tax law.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I can lean on others. And I think that's the other thing too, just from, a business perspective. I love collaborating with people, and I love just joining forces and just letting both of our expertise complement the work of like other people are doing. So
yes. Do you still meet with your money every day? Do you take days off from it?
I do take days off from it now. I think that was just such a healthy anchor for me back then. And I was noticing so many gains, I still meet with my money very regularly though, like multiple times a week. It's just not as daily as it was back then. I think the other thing that started to show up is that, money is part of our financial well-being. And we typically don't really either think about it that way, or we forget that it's part of like our wellness wheel, just as we have, mental well-being, physical well-being, relational well-being, all of these things. Finances has to be part of that as well. So just making sure that it's part of it's an integrated way of how we're living our lives, because money's always operating in the background, whether you acknowledge it or not. It was working in the background before you were even born, helping your family have different experiences or opportunities that were then available to you. It's operating right here, right now, with the decisions we make when we go grocery shopping or we're on Amazon or whatever that looks like. And so I think having that be just a normal part of everyday life is very important. And then on the emotional side, the thing that really irritates me in the money mindset space is like, well, we're going to fall in love with the money. We're going to nourish money. We're going to feel wildly supported by money. And oftentimes that bypasses financial trauma that might be in your history. It just has this way of not acknowledging the complexity And I think it's really important to neutralize money first, which we're going to do through normalizing it. And that becomes a much safer space to then build in that intimacy, build in that trust, build in that respect, all of those qualities that we would apply to any normal human relationship, right? But to jumpstart that without creating that safe space first and neutralizing the charge, I think can feel a lot of like forced and fake for people. So that's the other benefit of just kind of integrating it into how you're thinking about business and how you're doing life.
I love that. Yeah. It's actually like an inert thing. We give it power. And so slowing down and allowing money to be neutral and deciding what we want it to mean, deciding what we're going to bring to it, healing that trauma. I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have so enjoyed this conversation. Can you tell us what you are, before I let you go, will you tell us what you're excited about coming up, like the rest of 2021 and forward?
I am so excited about Feel Good Money Daily and really introducing people to cultivating a daily practice with money because I know how healing and life-changing it can be. I am so excited about watching the Feel Good Money membership community grow and that being such a money positive space. And I'm really, really encouraged with just how our world is going to change and evolve as this pandemic continues to kind of settle in, you know. I think it's really going to shape our culture in ways that we can't even imagine. And I'm really hopeful that that starts to shake out different ways of working and the ways in which we are defining our worth. Because I think for so much, we see our worthiness on productivity and how much we're able to get done. And I think the pandemic is kind of opening us up to a different way of being. So I'm curious to watch how all that continues to unfold, as well as so many more people waking up to the importance of equitable work and funding equitable change. The 2% Pledge initiative launched this year, which is a public and personal promise to donate at least 2% of your revenue towards organizations that are creating equitable change. So to watch that grow, there's so many things, but money is like such a huge part of that in a very beautiful, like powerful, intentional way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to loop back to talk about some takeaways that particularly stand out to me. Number one, you've got to get clear on the vision for your business and maybe do some deep inner work to figure it out. Megan knew she didn't want to open a new therapy practice every 3 years. She'd woken up her entrepreneurial spirit and discovered that coaching was a way she could create a business she could take with her anywhere. Understanding that vision allowed her to make the right choice for her, even though other people didn't really see it yet. She was able to get through the self-doubt by doing that deep work. Number two, find your definition of success. For Megan, it was important to stop chasing 6 figures. That was the definition of success she had kept hearing about from the outside. And then she asked herself what her dreams were and what they would really cost. And she came up with her own number.
I have been pursuing a number that held no personal meaning for me whatsoever. And something around having that meaning associated with my money just shifted.
Number 3, find the most easeful path to get there. Megan was in a situation where she couldn't run her business in a complicated way because she was raising 2 little ones and she had to work only 10 hours a week. Even if you don't have that particular constraint, look at what your most important goal is and then figure out the most efficient and easeful way to get there. Force yourself to simplify your business. Adding more offers or more marketing tactics doesn't necessarily mean that your business is better. It might just mean your business is more complicated.
I created one offer that allowed me to work 10 hours a week.
And those are my 3 takeaways that particularly stood out to me, and I would love to know what stood out for you. You can find out more about Megan at meganhale.co. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. And if you found this episode supportive, share it with your favorite therapist or coach or healer. That is by far the best way for us to reach more people. And thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. Do you find that what they're talking about then leads other people to kind of go further in? I guess let me try that again, Megan. We'll edit that part out, Cosmo.